I'm rusty at this. I haven't done it in so long.
Well, it says webinar is now streaming.
Yeah, if you can just give me one more second.
So nice to see everybody. We missed, the summer session. Okay, good evening. All right, go for it. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the September Chelsea Land Use Committee meeting. My name is Betty McIntosh, co-chair with Paul Devlin, who is right over there. And this is our monthly September meeting. And we have been meeting remotely for a good length of time, except for just a few weeks. We met in person, but then we went back to remote. This meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube. It will be accessible later. The agenda and materials for tonight's are public and can be viewed on the Community Board 4 website. I encourage you to go sign up for eBlast to get the agenda and a link to the documents beforehand. If this is your first time at a Community Board 4 meeting, there are 3 things you should know about. First, after each presentation, the committee will ask questions and comments, and then members of the public or attendees can ask questions or make a comment. After that, the discussion goes back to the committee. On some agenda items, committee members next vote to make recommendations. 3, very important, is how you get your voice heard. So to comment, ask questions, and so on, after a presentation and after the committee speaks, you must press the raised hand button on your screen. I assume that you have one at the bottom where it says raise hand. And if you're calling in on your phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Next, Paul is going to introduce our committee members.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad to see everybody again. Paul Devlin, co-chair of Chelsea Land Use with Betty. I'd like to have everybody go around and just say your name. We have a couple of new members. For the new members, if you wouldn't mind giving us a 15-second little bio of yourself so we can learn a little bit more about you. So let's start with our public member, Pam.
Pamela Wolf. Hello.
Tweed.
Hello, this is Twee Pham. That's how you pronounce the name.
Twee, thank you. Viren.
Hello.
Kit.
Evening, everybody. Kit Tylerson.
Barry.
Hello, Carrie.
David.
Hi, I'm Dave Holoka.
Tina.
Hi, I'm Tina DiFelicio Antonio.
Elzora.
Hello, I'm Elzora Cleveland.
And now to the new members, Peggy.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, just in brief, let's see, I've lived in Chelsea for over 20 years now, and I've always been very interested in servicing and supporting the community. So Manhattan Community Board 4 is like the perfect next step for me. So excited to work with all you guys. Thanks.
Welcome, Peggy. And Ronald.
Hi, I'm Ronald Vikram. I have been in Chelsea since 2014. Before that, I was in Hell's Kitchen. I've lived in the neighborhood since 2007. Very, very excited to be on the committee. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Ronald. So tonight's agenda, we have a presentation on a variance for zoning on West 24th Street to convert space to residential. We have a budget discussion. Many of you are familiar with the budget process. I'll walk through a little bit more of that detail. And then I have 2 items under old business I'd like to bring up, Starrett Lehigh and the Empire Station Complex. So Jesse, I think we're ready for the presentation from the team at West 24th Street.
Bringing them over now.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Chin.
Hi, Jesse. Paul.
James, who's doing the presentation? Is it you or is it Ron?
Ron is doing it. Is he
I'll
here?
be doing
Is he
it.
on?
Yes. Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Ron. And
Hi.
did you send the presentation to Jesse? Is he running the screen or are you sharing screen? How are we doing?
I'm gonna let Ron share his screen at this point.
Yeah, please. Jesse, is there anyone else from the development team in the waiting room? Sonny Choi or Michael Appel or Mr.
I invited them all over. It might, maybe they mistakenly declined. I can do it again if they would
Okay.
like to.
I could start as long as we know they're here. I'll start to share my
They are
screen.
here in the attendees section. Now Sonny is coming over now. Okay, I think he might have just by accident declined the first time.
Okay, great. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. Good evening, everyone. Ron Rosati, part of the development team for 157 West 24th Street, along with the owner, Mr. Jin Sup An, Sonny Choi, Michael Appel, James Chin, land use consultants, here to discuss this variance for residential use in an M16 zone. As you can see, I'm showing the tax map here. This is the site, West 24th Street, between 6th and 7th Avenues. It has 20.83 feet of frontage on West 24th Street, 98.75 feet in depth, for a total of 2,056 square feet of lot area. Show you the radius map. Here is the site, surrounded on both sides by residential uses. There was a 4-story building previously on the site, which did include 2 residential uses by way of a BSA variance from 1978. That was torn down a few years ago to develop a hotel use, but the zoning text did change in December 2018, even though the Department of Buildings did issue approval for a hotel in 2019. The owner did not pursue moving forward with that hotel, although he does have the option of going to city planning for a special permit or applying for a variance to continue for a hotel use. He has decided to develop residential at the site. I'm going to share the as of right plans. So as of right, the site could develop a 15-story commercial building, 20,000 square feet. It would be set back from the street 20 feet. There would, 18 feet wide inside. The stairwell, I'm going to some proposed floor plans. The stairwell, as well as the elevator area and circulation space, does eat up a lot of this small floor plate. So it is not ideal for a commercial development. We did do a financial analysis. It did show a negative 13.7% return for an office building at the site. The proposed plans are for a residential use. Showing these plans now. 15 stories in height, 155 feet tall, 26 units. No setback from the street, 19,856 square feet. That's a 9.65 floor area ratio. The district does allow for up to 10. Most floors would have 2 units, 1 bedroom each. I'll show you that. For instance, floors 2 through 12, stairwell, elevator, you come off a small hallway. There'd be 1 unit in the front of the building, 1 unit in the rear of the building. The top 3 floors, floors 13, 14, and 15 would be 2 bedroom units. on the top floors. And the financial analysis for this residential use was done, and it came back with a 5.9% return on investment. Now, we did also do a uniqueness study to show that narrow, small sites within this area are unique. So this shows the site. This is a 1,000 square foot radius. There are only 4 other sites within the area that are as narrow and small as the subject site. So it is a unique condition in the area. There aren't many of these narrow sites existing in these manufacturing zones. We also looked into height, as that was a concern that we heard. So we looked into the height of the 2 adjacent blocks. The proposed height of the building is 155 feet, shaded here in pink. So there are other buildings of that height or taller within the area. And if you could see this here, there are maybe, I would say, 7 or 8, possibly up to 10 buildings of that height or taller. And there are also, on this map, we show buildings between 125 and 155 feet in height. And there are many of those also. So the proposed height, as well as the residential use in the area, does seem to be within character of the area. Be glad to take any questions from any committee members.
Is that the end of the presentation, Ron?
Yes.
Okay. So the way we typically do this is the committee would go around, ask the committee if they want questions first. Then we go to the public for questions and concerns. Then we come back to committee for a committee discussion on how we would take a vote. So I'm going to start with Betty, who is going to talk a little bit about what it takes to grant a variance so that everybody understands what we're looking at here. And she has Betty and I have talked about some of the height issues she's going to talk about. So Betty, let's start with you. And then any committee members who have any questions, if you want to raise hand, I'll put you in order.
Okay, committee members, this is Variance 101. A variance is a discretionary action by the Board of Standards and Appeals, BSA, that grants relief for use and bulk provisions of the zoning resolution to permit a reasonable or practical use of a site, okay? Now, there are 5 findings that are required to be satisfied to get a variance. Number 1 is uniqueness. Usually it's a physical condition. For example, suppose there's a river that goes through a site and it's very hard to build on that site, or something like that. The applicant talks about the narrow lot and the small area of the site as unique. Number 2 is a financial hardship. The applicant spoke about that already, about whether or not you can get a reasonable possibility to get a reasonable return on your investment. Number 3 is it will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, should not impair the use of adjacent property, and will not be detrimental to the public welfare. I think that's all pretty self-evident. And then the proposal should not be a self-created hardship. So, for example, if that river going through the process, through a site was created by the owner, that would be self-made by the applicant, but that's not the case here. And then that it's the minimum variance. So in other words, just what's necessary to afford relief from the hardship that you have on the site. So that gives you just a thumbnail sketch of what BSA uses as criteria to give a variance. So now I think Paul will go on to the committee discussion. Oh, you know what? I was going to talk a little bit about the heights.
Yeah.
While I'm at it. I looked at the statement of facts that the applicant submitted. I hope everyone on the committee read all this stuff. There are, and according to just the block, the information was on buildings just on the block, the south side and the north side of the block. And there are 14 residential buildings on both sides of the street. Of these, there are 11 residential buildings with heights between 5 and 8 stories, which it would be 79% of the total. So the question would be about the prevailing residential character of the street is actually seems lower than the building height proposed for 15-story building. There are on the block, there are 3 residential buildings with significant higher heights, 12, 19, and 40 stories. And they are all on the corners or avenues and don't actually define the character of the block. And block, remember, I'm talking about the south side and the north side of 24th. Then there are 2 hotels with 42 and 45 stories, but they are not residential, so they don't really address residential character too much. So I'll let you absorb that information, and hopefully you'll pursue other questions and issues.
Great, thanks, Betty. It's helpful. Any committee questions? Please raise your hands. David, let's start with you.
Ron, could you tell me, I've forgotten whether this is rental or apartments for sale. Hello?
Yes,
Yeah,
hi. James, do you know, I know or Sonny, are you aware if it's rental or for sale? I'm not sure of that.
The economic analysis you presented showed a price per square foot, looked like you were doing sales.
Yes, the condo we're talking about.
Condo, yes.
Okay, and do you have any opportunity for a zoning bonus based on affordable housing? An inclusionary housing bonus?
We did not include any inclusionary housing or any bonus for that in the proposal. No.
Right, but is that an opportunity that you have?
Well, residential use isn't allowed at all. So anything would have to go through the BSA. So we'd have to present that to the BSA as additional bonus floor area if we were to include inclusionary housing. I don't know how they would look at that.
I think it's, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is not an inclusionary housing area, so therefore inclusionary housing is not an opportunity.
That's true.
Betty, may I just clarify a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, it's not mandatory, but if voluntarily, if they choose to provide affordable housing, that might actually give them some brownie points. Does that make sense?
It does. But affordable, realistically, the affordable unit percentages here would be hard to manage by HPD, and if we were to get one, it might be 1 unit for the community. So it's not something that's very worthy of pursuit for this size project. MIH typically is much larger buildings with more units and in zones that would allow for it. So we hadn't pushed on that in our pre-meeting. Anybody else have any other questions? Viren?
No, I'm just going to sort of go back and revisit that point. It is up to the developers to offer what they want to offer. So they can go for a higher percentage of number of affordable units. So if they say the 25% of the units are going to be affordable, potentially, I don't know, I don't sort of speak out of turn, but this community board may look at it a bit more positively. That's one suggestion. The second thing is the qualifying first floor. More often than not, if you actually have affordable housing and you have qualifying first floor, which might have community space or some such amenity, both for the building as well as beyond, could be looked at very positively as well. And that sort of allows them to, to make an argument for extra height as well. So these are the two suggestions I would make.
Well, yeah, Baron, I think that if I can speak on my concerns on the issue, because I've given everybody else a chance to talk, but I haven't really spoken myself yet, is my concern is the height of the building. Ron just said it fits in character with the rest of the block, but in my opinion, it really doesn't. If you look at that grid that's in front of us, the buildings on the block are significantly lower. The ones that are in pink that are higher are the hotels. And then the avenues are taller, which is something that we have supported in the past. And I think that, under criteria number 5 of seeking a variance, it's to seek relief to offset what might not work. And so, the presentation, they say that commercial space in this footprint wouldn't work and they'd have a negative return. And then they present a very tall building with residential units that then give them a very healthy return. And I think that there is an opportunity to reduce the height and still have a positive net return for them. And that looking at the rest of the block, I feel like this width of a space, 15 stories tall, is certainly not in character with the rest of the neighborhood. So under criteria 3 of the variance that Betty just described, this does actually alter the character of the neighborhood, and it does have a negative impact on the adjacent property owners. So my concern is on the height of the building. I applaud the developer has been before us in the past to talk about setbacks from the street. They had presented a hotel at one point. And we said that we like a solid street wall, and they have done that, which is admirable, and I appreciate that effort on their part. But I don't think that this really fits into the character of the block, and to seek a variance from us, where one of the criteria is altering character of the block, I'm prone to not support this. And given that the 5th criteria is minimal relief to give them an offset of return, this is a very maximum kind of level of relief. So that's sort of my opinion on this. Now I see Ronald's hand has gone up.
Well, can I just clarify my comment? I'm so sorry. I didn't want to jump my turn. The only reason my response was more to the sort of question about being able to provide affordable housing or not. But I wholeheartedly agree with you. The height is an issue. It is absolutely incompatible to the context. And I think they need to do better than what they've done. I totally agree with you. And that's one more item I'll put on the table for them to consider and come back and potentially present something that is more palatable.
Thanks, Varun. Ronald?
I just have a question. Why is it that the return on equity was, or return on investment on an office space, why was that lower than a residential space? Was it the height of the ceiling, or what exactly was the difference there? Or just the going rate for office space versus residential apartments?
Yeah, I believe the rents and just the spaces, which were very small because of the circulation area, only having one elevator, led to not an ideal situation for office space at the site.
Yeah, the description in the analysis shows that the footprint size is not as desirable for commercial space. A 15-story building with one elevator is a long wait for a commercial space to be in. And then the rates at which they could rent the space are lower than the rates at which they could sell the condominiums, the breakdown by square foot. So the cost of construction of commercial would be lower, but then the return would be lower. On residential, the costs are higher, but the revenue would be higher.
Understood. And then just one more question. Was some sort of a scenario analysis presented as to what the minimum amount of height would be in order for a reasonable return on investment?
That has not been provided.
No, we don't know that analysis. I mean, that would
Right.
be
Like
up to the applicant. But I had another kind of design issue to raise.
Can we, Betty, can I go to Pam before I come back to
sorry,
you?
sorry.
Pam's hand was up. Let me call on Pam next. Pam?
Okay. Just wanted to say that I generally agree with both what you've said and what Viren has talked about as well. It occurs to me that that site probably had a 3-story townhouse on it, and the idea of putting a 15-story sliver on top of a 20-foot wide frontage site is just kind of ridiculous. It's utterly non-contextual with the rest of that block and the neighborhood. I'm curious because I see that there are several other building lots that are quite nearby that are have about the same frontage, and I wonder what height those buildings are presently and whether they're capable of producing a profit for their owners. That's the question is, if these owners of this property were aware when they purchased the property that they were going to need to go to such lengths in order to turn a profit, why did they buy it?
Well, Pam, I think that would qualify into the fourth issue of a variance requirement is that it was self-created, and if they purchased the property in a manufacturing zone, knowing that what the market's like, I could follow your logic and see that as a self-created burden, but that's a stretch. Ron or James, would you like to address that question about what the return would be on a lower height?
We would have to analyze that. I mean, we don't have those numbers. We'd have to go back if the owner wishes to do so and lower the heights of the buildings and redo a financial analysis to see, what type of return that would give. I don't have that at the moment. We'd have to redesign the building and do the financials for that. And just regarding self-created hardship, you are allowed to purchase a site knowing it would need a variance. In this situation, they purchased the site wanting to move forward with the hotel use. They got caught up in that text amendment, but nonetheless, you can purchase a site that needs a variance as long as you don't create the condition you're asking for. Like for instance, before Betty was saying, like if a river is running through your site, as long as you didn't channel that river through your property, then it's not self-created.
Yeah, no, I would agree that under category 4 that would be a bit of a stretch for us to take, but I was presenting that argument. Anybody else from the committee? We have a hand raised in the public I'd like to bring over if no one else from the committee wants to add, and then we'll come back to committee discussion. Jesse, can you, I'm sorry, Betty, you had another comment. Go ahead, Betty.
Right. Just another thought is, well, first of all, just to go back to Pam, it was never a townhouse, as my reading of the history of that building, that it was a factory. Then they got long ago a BSA variance to put 2 residential units over commercial or factory use. That would seem unlikely over a factory, but at any rate, and then they went into this hotel idea, and then the whole thing kind of fell through. Anyway, I was just thinking about whether or not the two buildings that are on either side. I think, Paul, we were thinking about some kind of maybe setback after 6 stories to make it more compatible with the existing buildings near it. Do you remember that, Paul?
Yeah, we did talk about if you look at the street line, the other buildings have sort of a cornice working at about they're all at the same level. So I think, Pam, you asked, the rest of the buildings on that block are all at about the same height, and they have a continual kind of cornice work across the tops. And so we had talked to the proposal team about creating sort of a setback at that point and putting in maybe some cornice workings, some design factor that would tie the buildings, this building into the adjacent buildings.
Okay, I'm done.
Varian, did you have more to add before we bring in the public?
Just one quick sort of, I think somebody asked this question, then sort of the heights of the buildings on that block. I think the building next door, I just looked up on Zola, the building next door is about 8-story tall, and the building at the back is about 12-story tall. So I'm thinking that they could sort of play with these numbers, and because some of the older buildings have much better ceiling height, if they keep that height, not the number of floors, but the height of the building in the context, and then work backwards and reduce the number of stories, they might be able to manage like up to 10 floors. I'm not quite sure, but they had to go back to the drawing board and take a look at that, because I think there might be some way of finding the compatible scale.
Absolutely. And Varian, I think that's why we're talking about building heights, not number of stories as a concept, because you could do a 9-foot floor to ceiling, or you could do a 10-foot floor to ceiling, and that will impact the number of floors you have in the building. So very good point. Thank you. Jesse, do you want to bring Sylvia over? Her hand has been raised in the public. And then I see Anne-Marie Shanahan too. You can want to bring them both over. That'll be fine. And while we're waiting for them to come over, there was a letter received today. Jesse had circulated it from one of the adjacent property owners who lives in the building next door, complaining about the ability to have air ventilation in his apartment, and the adjacent building would block that ventilation for him. So there is one neighbor who's written in opposition already.
Ron, would you mind stop sharing your screen so the committee will be able to see each other? Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvia Lecter, you had your hand raised. You have a comment. If you want to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you live, and if you can turn your camera on, that would be very helpful. Sylvia?
She needs to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
There we are. Now we hear you. Go ahead.
And I've been trying to find how to turn, I'm used to Zoom, but I can't seem to turn the video on. Anyway, hi, I'm Sylvia Lecter. I live on 24th Street. I'm across the street. And unfortunately, I am in that, I'm in the building that is right next door to the new hotel, the 46-story hotel, the Hyatt that went up, which I was not able to be involved, but I would have vigorously opposed that. I think it's absolutely out of character for the neighborhood. That this little more relieved to hear that it's 15, but even 15 is very high for this neighborhood. Somebody had asked about most of the buildings on that side of the street are really 5 or 6 stories high. So again, I was very gratified to hear that a number of people talked about the height issue, and I think that really needs to be addressed. And that's all I wanted to share at the moment.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. Next we'll go to Anne-Marie Shanahan. Again, Anne-Marie, if you could introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, and then you have a moment to speak.
Oh, sure. There I am.
No, hey, Sylvia.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Shanahan. So I'm in the carriage house. So I'm directly next door to the proposed development. And I am president of the condo board here for Carriage House. And we have the same concerns. We're an 8-story building. We're right directly next door. Our concerns are also with regards to the height. I've only just learned of this meeting today and the news of these new plans today. Of course, we were very involved when the hotel was being proposed. And so really on behalf of the Carriage House building next door, we would just like to ask, for maybe some more time where our legal counsel only received the plans on Friday. I only received it, and the rest of the condo board received it today. We would just like some time, just some more time, if it could be granted, just to consult with an architect and just understand what's being proposed means, to us. And in terms of I mean, I'm on the second floor, but it's a very different situation, obviously, for those who are on the upper floors and who have windows that are aligning that side of the side of the building where this new building would go up. So really, on behalf of the building, I'm just asking if we could have just a bit of time to review everything as a building.
Thanks, Emery. And just so everybody knows, this is the first step in the process. We come through here, then it goes to full board, then it actually goes to the Board of Standard of Appeals, and they have a process as well. And the date for the BSA hearing has not been set yet. Is that correct, Ron and James? So there will be opportunities, Emery, for you to. This is the first step in a timely process. So.
All right, thank you.
I just want to ask Anne Marie, what is the address of your building?
We're 159 West 24th. So we're directly next door.
Okay.
On the west side.
On the west side. Yeah.
And just to put things in perspective in terms of height, if I recall, those buildings, even the different stories, and as Vera and I just discussed, the floor to ceiling height differences, I think most of the buildings are somewhere between 75 and 80 feet tall. And this proposal, I think, is 155 feet tall.
And I would also add, for our building, there are private penthouses that have their own deck areas, but as a building, we have a shared common roof deck. So again, at 8 levels, there would be impact, obviously, if this building were to go up 15 stories over that. But again, just put that out there.
Thanks. All right. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Oh, Jin Sapan, isn't he part of the development team though?
Yeah, I'm trying to bring.
So
he's not, for some reason, he's not. Jim, I'm going to let you try. Oh, here he goes. Thank you. Finally.
All right.
Maybe not. All right, I'm going to allow you to talk. Jen, are you with us?
He's on.
There he is. And he just has to unmute. Jin Sapan, you're joined us, but you need to unmute, and if it's possible, turn your camera on. Would appreciate it. Hello?
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
He looks like he wants to talk. His hand is raised.
Yeah, exactly. All right. While we wait to see if he sorts out his. Oh, is that Mike Noble I see? Wow. Welcome, Mike. James or Ron, do you know if you can text?
I'm here. I'm here, folks.
Fantastic. Did you move into a new apartment, Mike? That's a beautiful view you have.
Yes, I did. I used a different broker. I got a good deal
Don't
on
say
it.
that
Do you
to
like
me.
it?
Don't say that to me. So is Ron or James, can you find a way to confirm if Jin Supan wants to speak or not? He's had his hand raised, he's been brought over, but we can't hear him. And if not, we're going to move on with the discussion.
I believe he accidentally raised his hand.
Yeah, no, his hand is raised, but he's got no video and no audio. So
yeah,
I mean, does he know how to unmute?
I don't think so.
I think we can move on with the discussion. I don't necessarily, I think he just wanted to attend. I'm not sure he wanted to state anything.
Okay. All right. So anybody have any other thoughts before I seek a motion?
I think, Paul, I know we asked this question, and I think you sort of stated it, but can we confirm that again with Ron and and James that there is no date, the date is yet to be set for the BSA hearing? That's still accurate?
That's correct. We have to respond to comments and then we have to get on for a hearing date. So we're months away from that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, I don't know if the chair can make the motion.
No, I don't think I can, but what I could do is present some sort of a motion to entertain, and somebody else could follow suit and sit and move in that direction. But if somebody wants to make the motion, they can. If not, I can frame it and they can move it forward. Anybody?
Can you frame it, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So given
Viren has his hand up.
Who does?
Viren had his hand up.
Oh, Viren.
I make the motion that deny unless adequate response is received in terms of reduction in height, qualified first floor, and all the concerns that committee members raised.
Viren,
can you hear me?
I didn't quite get all of that.
So you said reduction in height, issues from committee, and what was the second one?
Make the building more contextual, qualified first floor, include some affordable housing, potentially, because it might not be feasible, but we want them to sort of explore that. But the two main issues is make the building more contextual, reduce the height. Third point being the sort of the commercial floor, make it more qualified first floor so that it includes some community amenities.
Do we want to be specific about the height in terms of the characteristics of the neighborhood?
I think I would say that I would talk about the adjacent properties are at a certain height, and that they should do a reduction in height. I don't know if I want to get into they should be 100 feet or 120 feet or 80 feet. I think that what I'd like to see is have them come back and, as Ron pointed out, they would have to do a kind of get their architects involved and do a reanalysis. And maybe they could do 9-foot ceiling, floor to ceiling heights and get in 10 stories. And that's that's 90 feet at 10 stories, and maybe 10 stories of apartments could work for them. So I don't want to prescribe the solution, but I do want to identify the problem.
Yeah, we can
make sense?
Well, we can qualitatively describe that, make the building height more compatible with the neighborhood character and contextual.
Thank you.
Viren, could
Yes.
you besides the height issue, could you perhaps specify how to make it more contextual with other elements, or is it just the height?
In this case, it's mostly the height.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if I want to say make it contextual. Maybe there's, we've already discussed with the applicant the desire to have a setback at the height of the other buildings so that the street wall stays the same. The facade looks like it hits that height. And then if they want to push back some and put some more height up behind a setback at 80 feet, that would be more contextual.
Okay, I think it's just good if we could specify that a little bit. That's
Yeah,
all. Is it okay, Viren?
Yes, I think contextual is in terms of scale, height, and the materials, right? Pretty much. We can't prescribe the design, but by calling it contextual, we're inviting them to sort of make it more contextual in terms of height as well as materiality. So we don't want to become too specific. I think we are not at that point yet to discuss more details. I think from what has been presented so far, height is the main concern, I would think.
Great. All right, so we have a motion to deny unless there is a reduction in height. It's more contextual in both scale, height, and materials. And then we take a look at some sort of community benefit, whether it's a ground floor space or affordable units.
I second.
Thank you, Carrie. So we have a first and a second. We'll call to vote. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Elzora, Tina,
Aye.
Brad. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Anybody present not eligible? Okay, we have a unanimous vote then. Thank you very much. James and Ron and Jin Supun, thank you so much for coming tonight. We look forward to working with you on something going forward.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, Paul.
Good. All right, next on the agenda is fiscal year 23 budget, the statement of community district needs. Some of you, many of you have been through this many times before. Some of you have never been through this before, but this is the start of the process for the city budgeting. Each community board presents a list of community district needs, and we propose a certain number of budget issues. That then goes into the city council and gets hashed out, and this is the very early stages of that process. We as a committee, every committee on the community board puts together their sort of statement of needs, and then that's all compiled by the second vice chair into one big document that we all vote out. I believe we vote out in the October full board meeting. So this is the start of the
I think it's November, isn't it?
November full board meeting. November full board meeting.
Next October, Chelsea land use.
Right, but we have the opportunity today to just start the process and start thinking about it. And then at next month's Chelsea land use meeting, we will vote on what issues we want to put forward to the full board or to the committee to put into the full board statement of district needs. All right. In the past, we have used some of these budget issues as a way to manage some of the political issues as well as the budgetary issues. There are both expense line items and capital items. As a land use committee, we have typically very small number of requests that we've made. Last year, we made 6 requests. And if you look in the Dropbox, you'll see that there was a document that lists all of our requests last year, plus it lists what the agency response was. And one of the examples was the expansion to have more funding to expand the special West Chelsea district. And they said, well, we'll include that in our current budget. And now we're looking at an expansion of the special West Chelsea district. And that's something that has come forward because of the sort of the political pressure we put on the budget process. So I don't know if people have had the opportunity to look through those documents and see what we had requested in the past and what the agency responses were like and what the OMB response was. But if anybody has any issues that they'd like to raise now that we can start to think about, and then if not tonight, we'd ask that you do take a look at these things and then send me and Betty what your thoughts are for a budget request so that we can prepare for next month's meeting when we'll have a more, more solid list of what we're requesting, and then we can actually take a vote on it. So does anybody have any thoughts right now on budgetary issues, needs that you'd like to see addressed? Budget concerns you'd like to raise?
Paul, I had raised one idea earlier, and you mentioned that because of the constraints on the current budget due to COVID, a lot of things shouldn't be considered. Do you think your view has become any more sanguine in the recent months?
Yeah, last year I did take a very personally, I took a harder line position on the budget issues that said we're going to be facing a budget crisis. And so we shouldn't put a whole lot of extra things in there that weren't addressing public safety, education, public health. So for me, but that was a very personal kind of stand I took. And I made that statement to everybody here. But I think that the fiscal year 23 budget, I would think, given the way the city looks today, I think that the budget will be stronger next cycle. So I'm not sure that.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, I can give a little context to that, David, as well, if that's helpful. I sat through the two out of the 3 borough budget consultations, which is all the community boards meet with the agencies once a year in September, and we just go through agenda questions and they answer them. Those Q&As are actually in your Dropbox if you want to look at them. They're called the borough budget consultations. LPC is one of the agencies, so it might be they provided some significant background material. I will say in general, the FY22 budget is, like Paul said, is very well. All of the cuts from FY21 are pretty much returned. And some agencies are actually quite flush because of the federal funding. That's obviously not clear, or very certainly not going to be around in FY23, but nothing was directly expressed to us to date saying there are significant concerns that the budgets won't be there to continue the work that they were doing pre-pandemic. But it's also, again, just a little bit of a political thing. No agency wants to admit that they're not being, that the mayor's not funding them.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you.
And one other thing I'd recommend to people, if you're going through these documents, there are a ton of documents, a ton of paper, a ton of information. I do searches for Department of Building, DCP, and LPC, so that I'm not looking through all the Department of Sanitation things. I'm not looking through all the Department of Transportation things. I just look at the issues that are relevant to land use. So as you're going through the documents, you might want to consider that tactic. Kit, you have something to add?
Yeah, I just have a quick question, and I'm not sure if this is a Paul Betty question or a Jesse question or both. But
Jesse, it's a Jesse question.
I was wondering items related to resiliency, if they would be in our jurisdiction or if they would land more cleanly with our friends in waterfront parks and the environment. I don't know exactly what the budget request would be, but thinking about neighbors who experienced flooding during Ida, I was wondering if that was something that our committee might suggest possible remedies for, or if that would go to another committee.
So do you want me to answer that since?
Yeah, you go ahead. I have some thoughts on that too, but go ahead.
There are plenty of times that there's overlap, right? I mean, committees overlap with each other all the time. So I think you could definitely make a point to say, while maybe, the majority of the idea would be with another committee, that this committee does think it's important that the funding for, let's say, I'm pulling something out of the sky, the Big U project, which, was never actually fully funded. Hey, Tina. So yeah, you could definitely say that that particular, it's interesting because that topic hits so many different agencies. When we do the borough consultations, it's always like a little bit of each agency talks about it. But yeah, I think, in my opinion, you could definitely raise it. It's a land use issue. You guys have voted on resolutions, applications specific for specific buildings, Starrett Lehigh being one of them, being the flood protection for Starrett Lehigh, but then also for the flood resiliency zoning overall. So I certainly definitely think you could have something to say about it.
Right.
This is Lev, by the way.
Jesse, I think that's right. And Kit, I think that, that because we did discuss the zoning text amendment on resiliency, and that there are issues, both infrastructure on the streets, there's buildings issues with resiliency, and then there's the water, the U thing that Jesse just mentioned. So it's keeping the water from coming into the city. There's how the water washes out of the city through infrastructure, and then what do individual buildings do to promote resiliency. So I think that that's a great way. We can focus more on the building aspects. I think that we could probably come up with some ideas on that. So great, thanks, Kit. So I see Mike, then Carrie, then Pam. Mike Noble.
Let me go last, Paul. This is something separate, so let me go last.
Oh, is this a different issue you want to raise under old business then?
Sort of.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll call on you after we finish this discussion then.
Okay.
All right, Carrie.
So Oh yeah, thanks, Kit, because I like the word I wrote down was flooding. So thanks for bringing that up, and that also opens the door for me to ask a quick question that goes beyond possibly even more committees in this board, which is, do we have any say or any sway over open restaurants, and can we help the BLP, which I happen to be on as well, with some of, what could be to come? So it's land use, right? But it's a different kind of land use. I know it's transportation, I know it's BLP, but I think that we are making proposals, and we are not sure what the city's going to do in terms of just letting it be a potential free-for-all. So I'm just wondering if our committee can help some of the other committees.
Yeah, Carrie, I'm going to send you a spreadsheet of a survey that was done of all the community boards in the city relative to their voting on open restaurants. Okay, so it's a running survey, and I've sent it along to a few people, but I'm going to send it to you because you asked the question. Okay, and it shows you where we stand now. Okay.
Yeah, Carrie, I think that if you want to take a look at this from it would be more of a Department of Buildings. With open restaurants, you're right, it's transportation and BLP, the licensing of it that seems to be driving the decisions, but there are some DOB issues in terms of how the structures are built, how they are maintained. So you might want to look into some DOB funding issues to address that. Maybe that's how we can tackle that. Pam?
So I think I recall that last year Hell's Kitchen proposed a historic.
Look, Pam, we lost you.
Yes, the answer is the answer to her question is yes. I know where she's going.
I don't know. You mean a historic district in Chelsea? Is that where she's
She
going?
was asking about the Hell's Kitchen Historic District, and we made that proposal. I don't know what the second half of her question was. I'm assuming it's related to the
All right, let's move on. If I see her come back to life, we'll.
I think I may know where Pamela was going, and we are working on a proposed extension to the Chelsea Historic District, and I'm wondering if that might be a possibility for some research funding as well.
Yeah, David, I think if you put forward some information about a study to conduct that might be something. I read through the LPC comments at the borough's meetings, and they're basically saying we're not going to add or take away anything. So I don't know that they would tackle it, but we can certainly put it onto our pile.
I think, David, it's a good way of getting it into our continued conversations. And so when projects come up, when possibilities for interns or land use studies come up, it's on our list, right? So I think that would be, I think you can ask for this study, knowing that LPC is going to say, while we love to entertain to review the study, we don't know if we wouldn't initiate it, but it is in the larger statement of district needs and budget priorities, and therefore when we do have the possibility of bringing on additional support and doing a study like that, like we did in Hell's Kitchen again, it would be on our list to do.
Right, but the money for the Hell's Kitchen research didn't come from landmarks.
No, the money from the Hell's Kitchen research came from the city council. So
okay,
you would this document is really directed towards to the city agencies, not so much the city council. I mean, we can advocate for ourselves because we are technically a city agency. There is a possibility of saying we believe community boards budgets need to be increased for this X reason and X reason. So if you wanted to do something like that, saying that, like, the 2 years that we had those additional funds, we did some pretty significant projects with them. We think that money should be reinstated and baselined into the budget. That was before it was the city council. So every year we never knew whether we were going to get it again or not. So that could be, I wouldn't, I wouldn't say no to that if you guys wanted to make that one of your priorities, to increase the community board budget to allow for projects such as what you're describing, David.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That might be a good approach. Viren?
Yes, I'm just going to sort of piggyback on what Kit brought up and what Carrie brought up. Going back to the resilience idea, I mean, there are some cosmetic ways of trying to fix.
Hey, Viren, can you move closer to the microphone? Thanks.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me better now?
That's better. Thank you.
All right, thank you. What I was trying to say is that just piggyback on Kit's point about resilience, and we keep talking about cosmetic ways of fixing problems, while we do know collectively that CSO is the biggest culprit, the combined sewer overflow that floods both Hudson River and East River. And that sort of raises the sort of overall water level. So it is a question that needs to be addressed at a much wider sort of, not wider, but much higher level. Sanitation is very much part of the problem. So even if you do a big U or a small U, until you actually address the issue of PSO, that problem is going to continue. That's number one. So I just want to sort of put that on the table. I don't know if it's the budget item or not. And going back to Carrie's comment about open streets and restaurants in the parking lane, it is a public, I mean, we talked about this with other committees as well, in transportation and waterfront and public parks. But public space is something that's not covered under any of our sort of committee structures. So one proposal is that maybe we should think about either having a brand new committee that looks at public safety and public space, including streets, that sort of go beyond the DOT and transportation issues, which is my proposal. I mean, I even offered that the task force could probably potentially take that up for the time being before it becomes something that before we decide that it's worth becoming a committee or not. So that's one of the things that I would want to put on the table. And the last thing, I don't know whether it falls under the budget issue or not, or it's an old new business. We are planning to look at vacancy in office space, and we want to conduct a study, and hopefully we'll find a fellow to help us do that. Similarly, the vacant storefronts is a big issue in this neighborhood. And I think we have to find a way of looking at that more comprehensively. And going back to Carrie's point, with winter around the corner, open dining may or may not pan out very well. Maybe we could temporarily find a way of using these vacant storefronts and help them retain those spaces before they sort of get all shuttered in. That's one of the sort of ideas that I would like us to discuss at some point, and maybe conduct a study and ask for a budget item for that.
All right. So what I'm hearing is that Kit, you're going to send me and Betty some ideas on budget issues for resiliency. David, you're going to send Betty and me some information on a study for expansion of the historic district. Carrie, you're going to send me and Betty some ideas on Department of Building budget issues for the street restaurants, open restaurants. And Viren, do you want to send us information on some of the vacant storefronts in a study for that? And we can put those all into the budget request for October. Pam, you're back. I think David and Jesse talked through a whole bunch of stuff while you were off, so we may have covered your issue.
I hope you did. I missed the whole thing. My internet connection failed miserably, and I tried to get back on through a different site, so I missed the whole show. But I think I got close to being finished with what I wanted to say. I'll be interested in going to look at the YouTube version of it, or whatever I have to do to see what actually got
well,
said.
we think you might have been heading toward funding research for an extension of the Chelsea Historic District, and that's what we talked about.
Exactly where I was headed.
Okay, good.
So
We're on board. So Jesse, you have been waving. So what do you have to say?
Well, one quick thing is like, I'm happy to send you some maybe ideal language, David and Pam, for that. And again, it's under the idea that you're advocating for additional funding for the community board to do such projects. So I think we need to also be aware that we'll probably maybe want to include other examples beyond the West Chelsea Historic District, but that could be one of the examples for sure. The first example. Again, it's just advocating for our budget to be increased to allow to do the study. Again, I just want to go back to this is, you guys are, Paul is doing this very well, and you guys are all jumping in really well too. Just remember that this is specifically to City Hall, to specific agencies. So when you're making the request, it needs to be to an agency that is going to do the work. And the way that the agency looks at it is it's either a capital project, meaning it's a concrete brick and mortar, it's a truck, it's something like that, or it is expense, it's staffing, it's training, it's a study. So those are the two things. There's a memo in your Dropbox that I created, and I re-up every year and update it a little bit. But I would take a look at that, so that gives you a guidance as to like how to kind of think about your request. And again, if it's work that you want us to do, let's say like the a study of the proposal to expand the historic district, then that would fall sort of into what David, the suggestion I made for David and Pam. So I just want us to be clear on that. So, and one other thing I think about the open restaurants, there's clearly the need for enforcement. And so, I think that's probably going to be, I would be surprised if that's not something supported by the BLP committee, more guidance, more enforcement, more direction in general. So that's something, again, it might not fall under directly your guys's, mandate, but it's something that you guys recognize that it was a land use application. You guys did a co-letter with another land use committee about the making it permanent, basically. And so you have your fingers on it on some way. So.
And my other recommendation is to read through the FY22 budget request and the agency responses. That'll give you some good guidance as to how to write the request too, because you'll see how the agencies are thinking.
I just want to follow up on Jesse's memo that I totally recommend, particularly for new members of the committee or newish members, to read Jesse's memo about the budget process and what we're doing here. It's very clarifying.
Good. Kit?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Just two more things very quickly. If anyone, Carrie or anyone else has ideas around resiliency, please don't be shy about sharing them with me. I'm happy to sort of summarize a couple of potential requests that we could make. And then just also wanted to add that in ACEs, the S is for street life. And so open restaurants has come up there as well, mostly though, talking about some of the sort of trash and debris that's being created as a result of open restaurants. The combination of restaurants essentially not knowing where or how to store trash now that space uses have changed. And then also the issue of when a restaurant goes under, the structures tend to just sit there and become more and more dilapidated, which the northeastern winters is likely not going to get any better as things get colder. So it's another topic that I don't think cleanly fits in one place, but we've been talking about it as well.
And with all these issues, we have the opportunity with the full board to have these discussions too. So if in the next, let's say 2 weeks, people can email those budget requests to me, and Betty will compile everything, put it into a spreadsheet so that we can vote on it at our October meeting. That'd be tremendous. Thank you. Moving on to old business. A couple of items I wanted to raise. And then Mike, you said you want to go last, so I'm going to hold off on you until the end. First, I thought of another thing I wanted to tell everybody. the intern application that we submitted to have somebody study space use for hotels converting to homeless and the radius of all that, that proposal looks like we're going to get a fellow for that study. So I want to thank Kit and Viren for all the great work on that. And we'll have more on that coming forward. The Sterrett-Lehigh extension of the Special West Chelsea District, there is a meeting at the Planning Commission on Thursday morning or Wednesday morning, I forget, whatever morning's on my calendar.
Public hearing.
It's a public hearing. Betty and I will be testifying on behalf of the board. I'm going to focus on the retail component, and Betty's going to focus on the other issues of our letter. But if anybody else wants to testify, it's a good opportunity to reinforce our messaging on the desire to have the Special West Chelsea District expanded, but given that they maintain the character of the neighborhood and the historic significance of those buildings. So just a heads up that that hearing is Wednesday morning if people want to testify. What was the other thing? Oh, and then the other thing I have is just an update. Betty asked me to talk a little bit about the Empire Station Complex proposal. As many of you know, the original state plan had a community advisory committee of 20 people that included only one member of the 2 community boards. That advisory committee was expanded, and we now have 4 from each of the community boards. Plus we have preservationists, we have residents, we have architects. We've really done a great job expanding that. We had a series of 12-week conversations going through point by point the application. This was the draft scope was presented. We had a lot of objections to it. The draft EIS came out. We had a lot of objections to it because the draft EIS the process is now in play. That's where we came in with this new advisory committee. We are now, the state is now saying to us, they're going to come forward with an alternative plan. So the way the environmental impact study system works is there is the proposal, and then they have alternatives that they study. And it's those alternatives that are critical to look at. And the state has said to us, they're going to come back with an alternative to study. And with the change in administration now, that has again been moved out. So we are still waiting to see what the state comes forward with as an alternative plan to their original proposal. And hopefully it incorporates a lot of the input from the community. I know the letter that we sent had 6 major points of contention, and that was circulated to a lot of people, so you probably have seen it. But just wanted to let you know that that whole project has been now paused since, I think May is when we paused this. And now we're looking at potentially November or December before public hearings kick back into gear. So if anybody had, David, do you have a question on that?
Yeah, do you get any inkling whether the calculus has changed because of the new governor?
It's unclear. I think that the new governor has stated that she is willing to look at the correspondence from the community and the input from the community. So I think there's a discussion like, oh, the whole thing will stop because Cuomo's gone. I don't think that's a realistic concept. I think that there will be some redevelopment of Penn Station, but how it comes about will certainly be different now that Cuomo is gone. But the notion that it's not going to happen, I don't believe that's the case. I think something will happen. All right. So that was my list. Mike, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to catch everybody up, you know, the Chelsea NYCHA working group, yeah, it's gone through stages. So we went through the RFP committee, right? We drafted that, the RFP. We're now in the review committee where we're looking at proposals, and 3 of them were submitted to us. So we're in the process of having multiple meetings, you know, lots of meetings. So that by the end of October, we will present our choice of one of these 3 proposers to do this work. And I might tell you that I'm not allowed to tell you specifically anything about it, I'm sworn to secrecy there, but we're familiar with a couple of them, okay? and you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised to learn what they proposed to us. So we had a big, long meeting today. We have about 12 or 14 more actually to go. So it's rigorous, and there's hundreds of pages of proposal material. But I can tell you that it's, it's finally coming down to the point where we're going to see something. I should have turned myself on. Okay.
Thank you.
And you can see this. See this? Can you see this? You can't see
beautiful,
this.
beautiful
This
view.
is, and what this is, we see where my hand is? This is hair. This is me as a hippie, 50 years later. So in any event, so Pamela, I knew you would love this. I couldn't get out to Massachusetts this summer, but that's where I used to go, Pamela. My hair like this, see? Ta-da. Anyway, so yeah, we're moving along, and there will ultimately be something that's appealing to the eye, to the community, and something that the tenants are gonna like. It's a great surprise.
Thanks for all your work on that. It's really surprise. It's a huge, it's significantly important. And Mike, while you're talking about NYCHA, I remember last year during the budget issues, we raised a lot of requests for capital improvements, elevators, things like that. If you it's not necessarily our committee, but it might be worth you digging into that.
It's a hopeless thing. It's a hopeless thing. Don't even.
We never just keep pushing it. Though. Maybe someday they'll fund it.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, it's hopeless.
Well, thank you, Michael, for participating in that. It is really a lot of time that you have to spend. So.
It really is, and I must tell you, it's more than I bargained for in some sense, But it's okay. It's okay because I look forward to this being, we've been here for 75 or so years. Okay, so what we're doing today is preserving this place for another, hopefully 75 years, but better. Just looking better. It's more. My thing is we're trying to get a habitable apartment for everybody, something that management deals with on a daily basis, responds to, and a safe place. And we have proposals that will put foot patrols in here, security people in here. It's a big, big issue, huge issue. If people feel safe and they've got a good place to live, it's going to make a huge difference. So this, I hope, is indeed the model for everyone else.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
All right. And one final announcement, just you've all seen it. There is the elections for the executive committee. So chair, first vice chair, second vice chair, and co-secretaries coming up. If anybody's interested in applying for those positions, I also have now, Mike, as you point out, taken on more than I probably should. And I'm now the chair of the nominating committee for the community board. Because I'm not.
Let me announce this now. People who want to be co-secretary should put their bids in. Put their proposal. If you want to be a co-secretary, do it. Okay. At least with respect to me. Okay. You got an opening. Okay. And I'm not going to back out this time.
Yeah, and as Jesse said to me when he asked me if I'd chair the nominating committee, he says, "Would you like to do this, or do you have no aspirations?" And I'm like, I think I have aspirations in my life, Jesse. Anyway, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody interested in adjourning? Very good. All right, thanks everybody. Great to see you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good seeing everyone. Bye.
Thank you.